Well, hello there. It's Ashley from Lovely Commotion. Thanks for joining me this Sunday. Today is all about tips for helping your students write their name in preschool. I did a video not too long ago about name writing and whether your children were ready in your classroom. And I even made myself like a roadmap for each student to go through and make sure that they have the skills, motor skills, that I have taught them the certain things that they need to know before they start writing. So I put a link to that video in the description. Feel free to watch that. But if you are at the point where you feel like your students are definitely ready to start writing their names, these are a few of my best tips. They are the tips that I give all the teachers that ask me about name writing. We have these discussions sometimes at my own preschool, and these are the things that I absolutely love and I think work well. So, number one, you may have already heard this one, and it may be not new news to you, but I have switched exclusively to golf size pencils. So these are actually have erasers, which are from Henry Without Tears. I found them at like some discount place. Oh, so amazing. But you can also just get golf pencils, like simple golf pencils. They don't necessarily need the eraser. They love to explore the eraser, which is fine. But golf pencils. You can also break crayons in half. That works really well. I also had found these mini like gel pens at Target, which was awesome. I also found mini highlighters. Like everything's becoming mini, and I love it because it is perfect size for them. And I kind of talk a little bit about that in the other video, but just thinking about the size of their hand and how heavy a big pencil may get, and making their hand be tired as they're trying to write and fatigued and making it hard. And we know when things are hard, children don't want to do them. So I have switched exclusively to these. I also have the flip crayons from Henry Without Tears. Again, I found those at the discount store. It was called Cargo Largo. So if you have one, keep your eye open. They flip, so they're little, and you've got one color on each side. We use those crayons as well. So that is my very first tip. What I always make sure that we do is use pencils sized for their hands. And then I start with their first letter alone. And I do this because I feel like if I am to give this kiddo who has a very big long name, like, I don't know, Alexander, and I give them this huge name, and when I say, okay, we're going to learn how to write this, it might be a little overwhelming. And so we start with that first letter. That first letter is that capital letter, and so we work on that first. And generally what I like to do is create tracing paths. So this is an example of one. I create these name writing notebooks for my students. It seems to work really well for me because the children can kind of go through the progression, and I do this while I'm with them. So I just have their name on the front, and we work on our first letter first. And so this tracing path is my third tip. So the first one, use golf pencils. Second one, start with the first letter alone to reduce some of that overwhelm. And then using tracing paths. Now, what I mean by that is if I am just writing it myself, which sometimes I do, I will use a yellow marker or a highlighter to write it. Because, and here, let me grab my highlighter here. I'll use my yellow highlighter. And with that yellow highlighter, I could use like a little note card. And when I write that, I'm going to write a C. They are going to be able to see the stroke from their pencil on the C. Okay. So I want them to be able to see their stroke. So that is why I like to use this. A highlighter, or when I'm printing, I'll use like a lighter gray. And this one still is not as light as I would have liked it when it got copied, but a lighter gray so they can see where their stroke is, right? Because it's really hard if it's in black for them to see how they did with tracing it. I also have totally ditched the dot to dot letters, the dots where you follow the dots around. And I've also ditched any of the letters with arrows. Um, I've decided to go with simple is better, and it seems to work pretty well because most of the time I don't think they understand those arrows and follow them anyway. And the dot to dot, I find some of them, not all of them, but some kids can go dot to dot and then it becomes a very rigid letter. And we really just want that flow of the letter. And so that is why I go ahead and stick with the highlighter or the light gray. So that's tip number 3. Tip 4 is when they move past kind of tracing their own letter, I give them a place to create their own. And so I like to give them a space, right? It doesn't have to be a box, but it could be a box. So they're going to do the letter inside the box. But you could also easily use like a index card, or something else that works wonderful is Postit Notes, because they're the size of a square. You can give them one and try to get them to fit that letter in there. Because sometimes when students are just learning to write, they've got very big letters because they don't have that fine motor control completely, under control. And so giving them that space, that defined space, and you can start with big spaces. You can start with the whole paper if you needed to, and kind of bring it down slowly. Most of my students that I've had do just fine with this size of box. There's been a couple, especially if they have some big letters like M, because it's kind of wide, or W, we might need to expand that box. Generally, they can do a box that size at 4 and 5. So that is number 4. Kind of give them that defined space to form their letters. Number 5, when I go to teach, like after they've kind of got that first letter down and the overwhelm's not so much there, they kind of know what this is all about, I do like to go straight into the rest of their name. And the reasoning I don't do it letter by letter for the rest of their name is because I want them to start seeing that flow. I want them to start putting together. They've already got, like if it were me, I've already got my A, and then I'm going to go back through and go S, H, L, E, Y. So I'm doing it in order. And part of our pre-learning, I guess you would say, of making sure they're ready is knowing how to say it out loud so we can start hearing it as well. So that is my next tip. Number 5, I like to just do them right in order. Don't confuse with okay, now you're this letter, we're going to only do this letter, because you'll find that some letters come very easily to them, and it's not always the same ones, and some of them they need a lot of practice with. So if there's one that they need extra practice with, then I will pull that letter out singly and we'll just work on that one. But in general, I just go for it the rest of the way. And so like, here's an example of that. I can trace my name, and so we're just doing the one name that time. Number 6, is to make the tracing path again for their whole name. It doesn't have to be printed. I'm so bad at this. It doesn't have to be printed. You could easily just make them yourself on sentence strips, right? Or just strips of paper cut up, or a large piece of paper if you feel like they need that larger space. It doesn't have to be pretty as long as they are tracing letters that are formed correctly and how your school is wanting you to do those letters. Also, kind of just a note, you'll see in here that I like to do my letters first upper, rest lower. And so I know there's some controversy over this, and I know that to each their own, but I will say that I had just actually recently read a post from Marian Gibbs from Right Out of the Box, and she declared as an OT that she wants to see, or she thinks that the first upper, the rest lower are correct. And as a former first grade teacher, I actually agree quite a bit, because I feel like they kind of get in that habit, and then that habit came to me in first grade, and I actually had quite a few children who were not leaving that all uppercase and writing it traditionally. So for me, that's what we do. That's what works for me and my classroom. That's what our center does. And so that's kind of why you'll see what we do. And others may have other opinions. That is wonderful. It doesn't, you do you. It's what works for me and my beliefs, but that's why you'll see it that way. All right. And then after that, really big tip and really important tip is to make sure that you are not handing them their name written out and just going trace this and then walking away. Want to know how I know? Because I did this. I did this and it didn't work out because I started watching and I was like, oh, they are not making their letters correctly. And even if I would have had the arrows, I don't think they would have really followed them. So I had just given them their name, say the name is Max, and I had this written out for them and I just gave it to them. And this was before they knew how to do it, right? And so there's Max, and here comes Max, and he is starting his letters from the bottom. That itself is a little bit heartbreaking because we know we start them at the top. So he might be starting them from the bottom, right? Or he might be taking this A, going around once, going around again, and then making a line down. They'll do all kinds of crazy things if you let them. And so to keep them from doing that and to teach them the right way first, make sure you're sitting there. And so this is why I'm not a big proponent of sign-in books until those students can form their name correctly on their own without you right there. Then they can practice it in the sign-in book, but as a starting point, I am always right there when we do these. And I am giving them the cues that they need and teaching them how to form those letters as I'm sitting right there with them. So that's tip number 7. And not only is it just a tip, it's just good practice because you want them to be forming them correctly from the start, right? And number 8 brings me to verbiage. So this is something I like to do, and I even like to share this verbiage with parents. So on Max's example, as they're forming it, I remind them things, right? As I'm sitting there with them. Start at the top, big line down, pick up my pencil. So they know not to go straight back up, right? Pick up my pencil, down the mountain, up the mountain, down the mountain. Okay, done with M. Let's work on A, right? Draw your circle, add your line. Okay, I add these verbal cues to every student's name and I share them with parents. I just type them out and send them to them and say, this is when we work on their name, this is the verbiage we use. And so it is familiar to them if you are working on it at home. And so that is a pretty big tip because not only are they seeing their name and they're using their pencil to write their name, now they're hearing the directions of what they should do. And so when they go to write it themselves, you sometimes hear them saying, start at the top, and then they'll start at the top. Big line down, and then they'll do the big line down. And so that has worked really well, especially in making them independent little name writers sooner. So that's tip 8. Tip 9, once they are proficient in writing their name, see if you can shrink it down a little bit. Try to fine-tune those fine motor muscles because as we know, when they head into kindergarten or traditional school and they're doing a worksheet or, some sort of page, the name box is not the size of the whole page. It's much smaller. So to bring that from a large name down to a smaller name, try reducing the size of their paper, right? And so I reduce the size of their boxes. Let me give you an example here. My fingers don't want to work. So we end up going down to 2 boxes. Then we end up going down to 4 boxes and just trying to fit it in there. And if you don't want to do boxes like that, you could easily take a piece of paper, do it in half, then maybe in fourths or taking your sentence strip and making it a little bit smaller. Just some way to take it from really large, which many of them like to write, down to much smaller to fine tune that name. So that's another tip. And then 10 is once they know how to form their letters and how to write their name, it's time to practice it, right? Because they will lose those skills if they don't practice them. And so instead of just every day saying, write your name, try some maybe fun ways to do it. Here's a couple that I have used and they have worked really well. There's a ton of amazing ideas out there. This one, woo, I'm telling you how bad I am at this. I cannot do mirrored at all. How about this? There we go. This one works really well. Just get a big piece of butcher paper and tape it to the wall or tape it to the door, like this one is taped on the door, and give them markers and have them write their name on it there. So you can kind of see some of those names there. They started a little too close to the edge, and so they had to follow up down below. That's going to happen, so that's just part of the practicing. And I like it because they're building those shoulder stability muscles because they're standing up straight and writing them. So that's a fun way because it feels like you're writing on the wall. Like, who doesn't want to do that? You can also take the same piece of paper and lay it on the floor and then have them lay on their bellies. And again, they're using those muscles to hold themselves up as they're writing. And you will find that their letters will not be able to be as big because they are laying on their belly and it's harder to make those letters big. Let's see. Oh, also putting it under the table, taking a piece of paper, like a roll of butcher paper, and I will just tape it up on top. And so down below, it is under the table, and I will give them a pillow or something to lay on and have them write it upside down while it's kind of upside down, but they're laying on their backs and they're looking up at the table and they're writing their name that way. Again, building a lot of strong shoulders that they need for writing and cutting. Let's see. Another one many of you may have done is shaving cream. Super fun. They can easily wipe it away. It's messy. Anything messy is always a hit. And then it usually makes your room smell good. So that's a bonus too. Usually just use their fingers to write that in there. And I show them kind of how to lightly erase, and they can do it again. Or if they mess up, they can easily erase. And then another one we do is salt trays. Actually, this in here is like that fake snow, and you could do it on the light table, or you could put a piece of paper, like a colored piece of paper under it, so when they write, it'll show through. This is great for when they're first starting their letters, right? Or find a longer tray with a smaller brush and do their whole name like that. That is a super fun way to do it. Obviously, adding chalkboards. We have a whiteboard in our room, not really for us, but it was for the church, and I will sometimes block off a spot in there and create a boundary rectangle. I have them right inside of that. And then, of course, they love erasing off of the dry erase boards. Oh, excuse me. Sentence strips are good ones too, because it's already got this nice long line skinny for them to write on. You could do clear plastic sheets on the light table with dry erase markers. Kind of makes their name kind of light up, right? That's fun. And is there anything else? Oh, taking it outside. So you could definitely use sidewalk chalk, or if it's a warm day, you could even take out paintbrushes and water and have them write them that way. We have some like wood structures on the playground that we will let them use their sidewalk chalk on, and they can write their names out there. And so we just try to take that name writing anywhere and practice, practice, practice. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope those tips were helpful, and I hope that maybe you gained a new idea. But if you would, will you please drop a comment and let me know your favorite way to have your students practice writing their name? Because I am always looking for new ideas, and you guys are the best ones to get them from. So drop us a comment. Let everyone know, what do you do in your classroom to practice name writing in a hands-on, fun way? All right, guys, thanks for joining me. Have a great rest of your day.